The barn door creaked, a low groan that sliced through the quiet of the Tennessee dusk, and I froze, my heart hammering like it knew something I didn't. I was 22, standing in the middle of a ranch that wasn't mine, with a man who was supposed to be just my friend's dad. But the way Mr. Callahan looked at me under the brim of his cowboy hat made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. My name's Ethan Harper, a city kid from Nashville who'd only ever seen horses in movies until that summer of 2025. I was visiting my college buddy, Jake Callahan, at his family's ranch in Franklin, a place so idyllic it felt like a postcard come to life. Jake and I had been inseparable since freshman year, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of escaping our small worlds. But this trip wasn't about Jake. Not really. It was about his dad, Tom Callahan, a man whose quiet strength and weathered hands stirred something in me I couldn't name. That first day, Jake had dragged me out to the stables, insisting I learn to ride. "City boy like you needs to toughen up," he teased, tossing me a pair of boots that smelled like leather and earth. I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted when Tom volunteered to teach me. Jake had to run into town for supplies, leaving me alone with his dad under a sky painted in shades of fire. Tom was 45, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by years of sun and loss. His wife had passed a decade ago, and Jake said he hadn't been the same since. But to me, he was a mysterious man who spoke little but carried a weight that drew me in like gravity. We saddled up 2 horses, a chestnut mare for me and a black stallion for him. "Keep your heels down, Ethan," Tom said, his voice low and steady, like he was calming the horse. "Not me." I nodded, my hands sweaty on the reins, hyper-aware of his presence beside me. The trail wound through fields of wildflowers, the air thick with the scent of grass and something sweeter, like possibility. Tom didn't talk much, but when he did, it was about the land, how it held stories, how it healed. I listened, hanging on to every word, feeling a pull I didn't understand. We rode for an hour, the silence between us comfortable yet charged, like a storm brewing. When we reached a clearing, Tom dismounted and tethered his horse to a post. "Let's rest here," he said, his eyes catching mine for a moment too long. My pulse raced, not from the ride, but from the way his gaze seemed to see right through me. I followed him to the barn nearby, its faded red walls glowing in the sunset. Inside, it was cool and dim, the air heavy with the smell of hay and old wood. I thought we were just there to check on the horses. I was wrong. Tom moved with purpose, checking a stack of feed bags, but his hands slowed, his shoulders tensing. I stood by the door, unsure what to do, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. Then he turned, his eyes locking onto mine, and the world tilted. "Ethan," he said, his voice rough, like he was fighting something inside. He took a step closer, and I swear the air crackled. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare break whatever was happening. Then, without a word, he sank to his knees in front of me, his hands trembling as they rested on the hay-strewn floor. I froze, my mind a whirlwind of shock and want. This wasn't supposed to happen out here, not with him. But the look in his eyes, raw, vulnerable, like he was bearing his soul, undid me. I wanted to reach out, to pull him up, to ask what this meant, but my body wouldn't move. The barn, the horses, the world outside it all faded until it was just us, caught in a moment that felt like it could break us both. "Tom," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer, just looked up at me, his face a map of longing and fear. I didn't know what he was asking for, but I knew I wanted to give it. And that scared me more than anything. The barn felt like a crucible, holding us in its heat, forging something I didn't yet understand. Tom's knees pressed into the hay, his breath uneven, and I stood rooted, torn between running and falling into whatever this was. My mind screamed that this was wrong. Tom was Jake's dad, a man twice my age, a widower who carried his grief like a second skin, but my heart didn't care. Ethan, he said again, softer this time, like a prayer. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he was afraid I'd bolt. I didn't. I couldn't. His hand reached out, hovering near my arm, not touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth of him. I'm sorry, he murmured, his voice thick with something that sounded like shame. I didn't mean to. I just... What? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. What is this, Tom? My chest ached with the weight of the question, with the fear of his answer. I wasn't ready for this. Wasn't ready to face the part of me that had stirred awake the moment I saw him. He stepped back, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his eyes darting to the barn door like he expected someone to burst in. I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty in his voice cut deeper than any lie could have. I've been fighting this for days, Ethan. Since you got here. The way you look at the world, the way you listen, it's like you see me. Not the man everyone else does. His words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to tell him I felt it too. That his quiet strength, his steady hands, his rare smiles had been pulling me under since I arrived. But I didn't know how to say it. Didn't know if I should. Instead, I took a step closer, closing the gap between us. You're not invisible, Tom, I said, my voice trembling. Not to me. For a moment, we just stood there, inches apart, the air thick with unspoken truths. Then the barn door slammed open, and Jake's voice cut through the haze. Ethan. Dad. You guys in here. Panic seized me. Tom stepped back, his face a mask of control, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Over here, Jake, he called, his voice steady despite everything. I turned away, pretending to adjust the mare's saddle, my heart racing as Jake strode in, oblivious to the tension. Everything okay? Jake asked, glancing between us. He was all easy grins and sunburned cheeks, so unlike his father's guarded intensity. I nodded, unable to speak, my mind replaying Tom's knees hitting the floor, his eyes burning into mine. Yeah, Tom said, his tone clipped. Just showing Ethan the ropes. He moved to the feed bags, busying himself, and I followed Jake out into the fading light, my legs unsteady. The rest of the evening passed in a blur dinner with Jake's mom's old recipes, laughter that felt forced, and Tom's silence across the table. I couldn't look at him without feeling the barn's shadows clinging to me. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, the memory of Tom's vulnerability haunting me. I'd never felt this way before, not with anyone. I'd dated guys in college, flings that fizzled fast, but this was different. This was deep, raw, terrifying. I didn't know if it was love or something else, but it was real, and it was tearing me apart. By morning, I was determined to talk to him, to understand what had happened, what it meant. But when I found Tom in the stables, he was different, distant, his walls back up. We need to forget yesterday, he said, not meeting my eyes as he brushed down his stallion. It was a mistake. A mistake. I echoed, anger flaring. You don't get to decide that alone, Tom. He flinched but didn't look up. I'm too old for you, Ethan. And I'm Jake's dad. This can't happen. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the pain in his voice stopped me. I saw it then, the fear, the guilt, the weight of a life he'd been carrying alone. I left the stables without another word, my heart a tangled mess of hope and hurt. The next few days were torture, a dance of avoidance and stolen glances. Tom threw himself into ranch work, fixing fences, tending horses, anything to keep distance between us. I stayed close to Jake, helping with chores, but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in that barn, replaying Tom's trembling hands, his broken voice. I didn't know how to reach him, or if I even should. Jake noticed something was off. "You okay, man?" he asked one afternoon as we stacked hay bales. His green eyes, so like his dad's, searched mine. I forced a smile, muttering something about the heat, but guilt gnawed at me. Jake was my best friend, the guy who'd shared his dorm snacks and his dreams of becoming a vet. Betraying him felt like betraying myself, but denying what I felt for Tom was impossible. That evening, I found Tom alone by the creek, skipping stones across the water. The setting sun cast long shadows, and for a moment, he looked younger, unburdened. I approached quietly, my boots crunching on the gravel. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He didn't turn, just tossed another stone. "There's nothing to say, Ethan." "There's everything to say," I shot back, stepping closer. "You can't just shut this off." I felt it too. He froze, the stones slipping from his fingers. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were raw, unguarded. "You don't understand," he said. "I've spent years burying this part of me. After Sarah died, I thought I could just exist. For Jake. For the ranch. But you," he broke off, his voice cracking. "You make me want things I can't have." His words hit like a wave, pulling me under. I wanted to ask what he meant, what he'd buried, but fear stopped me. Instead, I reached out, my hand brushing his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. "What are you so afraid of?" I asked. "Everything," he whispered. "Losing Jake. Losing myself. Hurting you." We stood there, the creek gurgling softly, the air heavy with what we couldn't say. I wanted to tell him I wasn't afraid, that I'd take the risk, but the words stuck. Before I could find them, Jake's voice called from the house, breaking the moment. Tom stepped back, his walls snapping into place. "Go," he said. "Jake needs you." I wanted to stay, to fight for this, but I turned and walked away, my heart heavy. The rest of the week blurred rides with Jake, meals where Tom barely spoke, nights where I lay awake, wrestling with feelings I couldn't name. I started to wonder if Tom was right, if this was a mistake. But every time I saw him, his hands steady on a horse's reins, his eyes catching mine across the yurt, he knew I couldn't let it go. On the last day of my visit, Jake planned a group ride with some neighbors, a big event with laughter and music. I almost didn't go, but Tom insisted, his voice neutral. "It'll be good for you," he said, but his eyes said something else. The ride was lively, the fields alive with chatter, but I felt like a ghost, my thoughts back in the barn. Tom rode ahead, his silhouette strong against the horizon, and I wondered if I'd ever know him the way I wanted to. As we neared the barn again, my stomach twisted. I didn't know what I expected another moment. A confession, a fight, but I knew I couldn't leave without answers. When the group stopped to rest, I slipped away, heading for the barn, hoping Tom would follow. He did. The barn was darker this time, the air cooler, the shadows deeper. I stood by the stalls, my hands clenched, waiting. When Tom stepped inside, his face was a storm of conflict, want, and fear warring in his eyes. He closed the door behind him, the click loud in the silence. "Ethan, we can't keep doing this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He stood close, too close, and I could see the pulse at his throat, the tension in his jaw. "Then why are you here?" I challenged, stepping forward. You could have stayed with the group. But you followed me. He flinched, like I'd struck him. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, his voice raw. I've spent my whole life doing what's right, raising Jake, keeping this ranch alive, honoring Sarah's memory. But you make me question everything. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. What am I to you, Tom? A mistake? A moment? Or something more? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the man beneath the armor, the one who'd loved and lost, who'd hidden his truth for years. You're more, he said, so quiet I almost missed it. And that's what scares me. Before I could respond, he closed the distance, his hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. The touch was electric, grounding, everything I'd been craving. I leaned into it, my breath hitching, and for a moment, the world was just us two people finding each other in the dark. Then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters, but when I kissed him back, it deepened, desperate and hungry. His hands gripped my shoulders, pulling me closer, and I felt the years of longing in every touch. The barn, the ranch, the rules of the world, they all melted away, leaving only this. But it didn't last. He pulled back, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with panic. We can't, he said, stepping away. Jake, the ranch, this isn't right. Stop saying that, I snapped, my voice shaking. You don't get to decide what's right for me. I'm here, Tom. I'm choosing this. He shook his head, his face crumpling. You don't know what you're asking for. This could ruin everything. Then let it, I said, reckless with want. I'd rather ruin everything than pretend this isn't real. He stared at me, torn, and I thought he might kiss me again. But then we heard voices outside, Jake and the others, getting closer. Tom's face hardened, and he turned away. Go back to them, he said. Please. I left the barn, my heart a battlefield, my lips still burning from his kiss. The rest of the ride was a blur, Jake's laughter a distant echo. I couldn't look at Tom, couldn't bear the distance he'd put between us again. That night, I packed my bags, ready to leave for Nashville, but I knew I wasn't leaving this behind. Not him. Not us. Back in Nashville, the city felt suffocating, its noise a poor substitute for the ranch's quiet. I threw myself into work, picking up shifts at a coffee shop, but Tom was everywhere, in the smell of leather, the strum of a country song, the ache in my chest. I hadn't heard from him since I left, and Jake's texts were all about school, oblivious to the storm he'd left me in. I tried to move on, to forget the barn, the kiss, the way Tom's eyes had held mine. But late at night, when the city slept, I'd replay it all, wondering if I'd imagined the connection, if I'd been a fool to think it could be more. Then, a week later, a letter, Aravedno return address, just my name in Tom's careful handwriting. Inside was a single page, his words spilling across it like a confession. He wrote about his life, how he'd loved Sarah fiercely, how her death had broken him, how he'd buried his attraction to men to protect Jake and honor her memory. You woke something in me, he wrote. Something I thought was gone. But I'm scared, Ethan. Scared of what this means, of what it could cost us both. I read it a dozen times, my heart aching with every word. He hadn't asked for a response, but I couldn't let it end like this. I drove back to Franklin that weekend, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I pulled into the ranch, Jake was gone visiting his girlfriend. Tom said. We were alone again. He met me at the porch, his face unreadable. You shouldn't be here, he said, but he didn't send me away. I read your letter, I said, holding it up. And I'm not letting you hide anymore. He sighed, leading me to the barn, like it was the only place we could be honest. Inside, he faced me, his eyes tired but open. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to be this person. Then we'll figure it out together, I said, stepping closer. I'm not asking for promises, Tom. Just a chance. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, his embrace fierce and grounding. We stood there, holding each other, the barn a silent witness to our truth. For the first time, I felt like we could be something real, not a mistake, not a moment, but a beginning. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Tom and I stole moments when Jake wasn't around, quiet talks by the creek, rides through the fields, kisses in the barn's shadows. Each one felt like a victory, a step towards something neither of us fully understood but both wanted. But the fear was always there, fear of Jake finding out, of the town's judgment, of the life we'd disrupt. Jake started to notice the change. You're different, he said one night over beers, his brow furrowed. You and Dad both. What's going on? I froze, my heart in my throat. Just figuring some stuff out, I said, hating the half-truth. Tom was quieter than usual, his eyes on the table. I knew we couldn't keep this secret forever, but the thought of losing Jake's friendship or worse, his family tore at me. One evening, Tom took me to a hill overlooking the ranch, the stars bright above us. I came out to Sarah before she died, he said, his voice low. She knew, and she loved me anyway. Said I should live my truth after she was gone. But I couldn't. Not until you. His words broke something in me, a dam of fear and hope. I kissed him under the stars, my heart full, but the weight of his confession lingered. We had to tell Jake, had to face the consequences. The next day, we sat him down in the kitchen, the air heavy with anticipation. Jake, Tom started, his voice steady but soft. There's something you need to know. About me. About Ethan. Jake's eyes narrowed, flicking between us. What's this about? I took a breath, my hands trembling. I care about your dad, Jake. More than a friend. And he feels the same. The silence was deafening. Jake's face went pale, then red, his jaw tight. You're joking, he said, but his voice shook. Dad, tell me he's joking. Tom met his son's eyes, unflinching. I'm not, Jake. I've been hiding this part of me my whole life. Ethan, he's helped me see I don't have to anymore. Jake stood, his chair scraping the floor. This is messed up, he spat, storming out. The door slammed, and I felt like I'd lost everything. Days passed, and Jake's silence was a wound that wouldn't heal. Tom and I clung to each other, finding solace in stolen moments. But the ranch felt emptier without Jake's laughter. I blamed myself, but Tom wouldn't let me carry it alone. He needs time, he said, his hand warm in mine. He'll come around. I wasn't so sure. I moved back to Nashville, giving Jake space, but I kept in touch with Tom, our calls and letters a lifeline. He was trying to rebuild, to be the father Jake needed while honoring his truth. I admired him more than ever, but the distance hurt. A month later, Jake called. His voice was quiet, uncertain. Can we talk? He asked. I drove to Franklin, my heart in my throat. We met at the creek, the same place Tom had bared his soul. Jake looked older, his eyes heavy with thought. I was angry, he said. Not because of you and Dad, but because you didn't tell me. I thought we were friends. We are, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. He nodded, kicking a stone into the water. Dad told me about Mom, how she wanted him to be happy. I get it now. It's just hard. We talked for hours, the words raw but honest. He wasn't ready to fully accept it, but he wasn't running anymore. When Tom joined us, Jake hugged him, a small gesture that felt like a miracle. The barn still haunts Minute because of what happened, but because it changed everything. It was where I found Tom, where I found myself, where we dared to love despite the fear. We're still figuring it out, Tom and I, building something real in a world that isn't always kind. But every time I see him, his eyes steady and warm, I know it's worth it. Love, like the land, holds stories. Ours is just beginning.